Welcome to the Lemon Grove Podcast. It's the place we explore the stories behind the food, the cultures that shape our tables, and the people who make that happen. And today I'm delighted to welcome Anna Ansari. Hi, Anna.
Bruce, thank you so much for having me. This is so delightful.
It's wonderful to see you and to get your book, Silk Roads, a Flavour Odyssey with recipes from Baku to Beijing. And we're going to be talking about the book a lot in this podcast, and also all the kind of ways and means of what the Silk Road is and what it means to people, what it means to Anna. So, Anna, maybe you could just give us a quick introduction into your life and how you got to this point. And I'm particularly interested in how you ended up as a teenager, 16 or 17, in China, I guess Peking at the time. Beijing now.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, again, thank you so much for having me, Bruce.
Pleasure.
Your podcast is a true joy and a delight in a world filled with like too many podcasts. Yours fills a wonderful niche, and I'm so glad to be a part of it. But you asked me for a quick history. It's just basically impossible because it's like... there's a lot that goes on, and how I got to where I am is a really long story, but how I got to China in the late 90s is actually a pretty simple one, which is to say, summer of 1996, I was on a study abroad program in Switzerland, learning French, and I was apparently also learning how to smoke cigarettes and drink beers because it was Europe and you're a teenager on a study abroad program, and my parents found out, and they basically were like, okay, so you're not going back to Europe. No more Europe for you. We're from the Midwest, from Detroit, and, my dad's from Iran. They're both like teetotalers in general, but they were like, no way are you going back to Europe. But we're going to look into this program basically out of Duke University that sends you to Shanghai for 6 weeks, and you can learn about Chinese language, Chinese culture, Chinese history, and, it'll look great on a college application. And I was like, but I want to go to Italy. I want to go see Rome. And they were like, we don't want you to go to Italy and see those Roman boys and those Roman wines. So, and my father, being from Iran, was, I think, in some ways very much ahead of the time in recognizing the importance and the growing significance of China in the late 1990s. We flew into Hong Kong that first trip. I think the handover was, I think, on July 17th, and we flew in like a couple of days later. Maybe it was July 1st, and I flew in on July 17th. Yes. I can't remember. But like, we got to Hong Kong right after it had been given back to mainland China. So this was it was a very different time. And so to go to China as a Midwestern teenager at that time was really rare.
Now, your father, he plays a big role in your life in terms of the food and the travel. And your mother as well, but your father's mentioned quite a lot in the book.
Well, I mean, I think that is because, for multiple reasons, but specifically because my father is from Iran and my mother is from Michigan, and Michigan is not on these sort of titular Silk Roads, whereas Iran and the Iranian and Azeri foodways form a large part of not only my personal heritage and culinary point of view, but also my worldview, as well as specifically the Silk Roads and the regions represented in my book. So, my mom is in here, my other family members are in here, but it's my dad who kind of provided that initial push, number one, to go to China. Number two, the story that I start the book off with about taking melons from Uzbekistan, failing to take a melon, actually, from Uzbekistan back to the U.S., and that was sort of the jumping off point for writing the book, was that story.
Yeah, and people can read the story in the book, but we will touch on that because it's kind of symbolizes the Silk Road. And I was thinking, the Silk Road doesn't end in Baku or the Mediterranean. It ends in this story. It ends in Michigan because
exactly.
Your father brought that melon from the Silk Road all the way across the Atlantic into Michigan. I know it didn't quite get there because
not quite.
The spoiler. I won't give any spoilers away, but
he got to Michigan, and I'm from Michigan, and I think that when we initially conceptualized the book, it really was more about the notion of the Silk Roads as a physical network of trade routes, which they still are. Central Asia, you talk a lot about now about the new Silk Roads, especially in China and the stands right now. So this is still a term that is actually being used to describe movement of people and goods and politics across these regions. But I really like it began as that for me and then kind of did go into Michigan. And I think I talk about it
Yes.
in the book about how these Silk Roads are and were imagined, right? Like this was a term, the Silk Roads, that was actually created hundreds and hundreds of years after these networks of trade routes even existed, and by a German man,
Yes.
no less.
Baron von Richthofen.
Exactly. Like this is the notion of the Silk Road, first of all, as a singularity versus the plurality, is a specific like Western creation. So for me, when I started to write it, I was like, okay, Baku to Beijing, this connects my heritage with my teen and 20s and academic and life experience in China, and I'm going to use the Silk Roads as this trade network to connect all of this. But the more I explored these regions, explored my own personal background and point of view, and kind of what I wanted to get across in the book, not just with regard to these specific regions, was that these Silk Roads can kind of just be a metaphoric, that they can extend into a London kitchen, into Michigan, because not only because of the way people have moved and continue to move, but because the foodstuffs that are from this region originally, or the cuisines and the cultures, they're moving as well. And they have made their way into our tables, into our homes, into our lives as well. So it's this constant movement of people across these regions, but those fingers like stretch. They stretch as far as we want them to stretch in some ways, because it always was imagined. So maybe this is my imagination of it as well now.
No, but I love these imagined routes, and they did exist, but they weren't, they as you say in the book, they weren't paved roads. So sometimes they were tiny little paths. And
Yeah.
I've got a beautiful map here, and it goes through like the Gobi Desert, the Takmalin Desert, goes up through Uzbekistan, through the Caucasus Mountains, and there's like fingers going everywhere.
Yes.
And for me, the Silk Roads, and I think I speak as a grandson of empire, because my grandparents were born while Queen Victoria was alive, British Empire, end of the 19th century, and my maternal grandparents came from Austria when the Austro-Hungarian Empire was still alive.
Oh, you are
And,
indeed a grandchild of empire.
I've never called myself that before, but for me, things like Samarkand, Baku, Constantinople, I know now Istanbul, they were very, and I'm going to use this terrible term, exotic terms for us in the 70s. They were very evocative, and we only ever saw them occasionally on BBC programs or on National Geographic, and these amazing pictures of Islamic art and caravan trains. So, but you're from Heritage, Michigan, you said, and Iran. And how did that Iranian, Azeri background encourage you or point you in a direction of wanting to write a book about the Silk Roads?
Basically, it came down to this, meal in China that I had with my father in 1998. He came to visit me. He actually flew from Iran to Beijing. I was living in China for a year, living with a Chinese family and studying Mandarin, yada, yada. My dad flew, he always thinks it's funny. He's like, there's no evidence that I ever went to China on my American passport, because he flew on his Iranian passport and then back. But we went to this Uyghur restaurant in Beijing, and we were just having this beautiful sort of Turkic meal. Uyghurs are an ethnic minority now from northwestern China. And my dad was just talking to the waiters, like, in kind of pidgin Turkish, because it's different, different dialects. And his mother tongue is an Azari Turkish dialect, and the Uyghur's mother tongue is a Turkic, a Uyghur Turkic dialect. But they could still kind of converse, and I was so confused by this and just like flabbergasted. I'm like, listen, I'm the one who's here to learn how to speak a language, and my Mandarin was so bad at that point. I'd only been there for about 3 months, but meanwhile my father is the one who's able to communicate. And so that was kind of this memory of this that I had when I was going into I submitted a very, very, very rough draft of what this book eventually became for the Yen Kitso Award about 5 years ago or so, which is an award for writing about Asia, food in Asia. And I really had that that meal in the back of my mind, thinking to myself, I'd like to talk about the way in which the connections of the Turkic food heritage across this region worked. So it started with my dad and this Uyghur waiter, basically.
The Turkic people, they're not Turkish people. They're from this kind of area, northern Iran, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan. Is that right?
I mean, I don't really want to pull apart because, the notion of a Turkic people also kind of was nationalized by Ataturk once he came to power. And there is this notion of pan-Turkism that is very politicized. I'm not really the appropriate person to speak to. However, I do recognize, linguistically speaking, that these Turkish languages are the ones that are across these regions. That in Turkey, there's a Turkic language. In northern Azerbaijan, or the Republic of Azerbaijan, that Azeri Turkish is a bit different than my dad's Azeri Turkish in Iran. There are places in Khiva in western Uzbekistan whose Turkic language is different than the language in Tashkent towards the east, but they're connected not only ethnically, which I think is somewhat loaded, but specifically linguistically. So my father was able to connect to this Uyghur Turkish person, Turkic language speaking individual, because of their shared linguistic history, which is also for many a ethnic one as well, but like I said, not one that I'm necessarily qualified to talk about.
No, that's fine.
The people have all been kind of connected and have, there's a shared heritage and pride in some of this connectivity. Some of it is, I think, politically oriented and maybe manufactured, but there's certainly this notion of this Ozgug Turk in Iran or in Azerbaijan who then had these tribes that everyone is descended from there, as with many different groups, these kind of mythological origin stories and creation and relationship stories. But no, that's kind of how I initially envisioned the book, and I was coming from this notion of this Turkic movement, but then I basically changed my mind.
But the food and the food ways and the ways that people interact with ingredients become a real fascinating arm of study, anthropology. I would say over the last 30 or 40 years.
Yeah.
And increasingly, people realize that food is like the root of everything.
I know.
I mean, I don't know why it took so long for people to
I
kind of do
either.
that.
I think we've just been forgetting what we're doing.
I wonder if it's. I mean, when newspapers started, they put the cooking pages in the women's section, and they didn't because that's where back in the 30s and 40s. Stupidly, that's where they thought it belonged. I mean, that's a whole nother podcast, a whole nother series. But now food is so important, and Britain at the moment is going through this wretched immigration type thing. And you're an immigrant. My parent, I'm direct descendants of immigrants, and we all, I think, bring something magical to this country.
100%.
So you've got this idea for a book, but you were a lawyer, I think, trade lawyer.
Yeah, customs and trade. I mean, I thought it was kind of fun. It was like a game. It's where can I help my client to source their products from that get them the best rates? If you manufacture this here, but then you move some of that to here to take advantage of this trade agreement. There's a lot of strategy involved, but I mean, I moved to the UK because I fell in love with a Scotsman, and I was here also before Brexit. So when I was trying to get a job as a customs and trade lawyer, it was basically impossible because we were the EU. There was no need for anyone to kind of help with trade rules because it was your biggest trading partner is yourself, the EU. Things are obviously different now, but no, I think that trade to me really was something I talk about in the book, but it's true that I discovered this book called The Golden Peaches of Samarkand, which is a sort of compendium of the different goods that were traded across the Tang Dynasty through Iran and into Xi'an in China and Uzbekistan, Samarkand. Literally, I read this 20 years ago when I was in grad school, and I thought it was so interesting. It was so fascinating to me. There are chapters about the birds that were sent. There's a chapter on foods. There's a chapter on people. There was a slave trade going on in this area at that time. But so just the notion that this was a modern job for me to help, negotiate trade deals, not negotiate, but like, fiddle with trade
Yes.
deals so that people could take advantage of them. And then I can write about the way people in which were people, hundreds and hundreds of years ago were sending spinach as a trade tribute from ancient Persia to China. It was so exciting to me to be able to connect these different facets of my interests and academic and professional backgrounds. But no, trade can totally be boring. There's a reason no one knows what tariffs are until Trump has started talking about them. Like, these are these kind of, but they're also these, a part of the world, a part of our life, a part of, the interconnected nature of the world that it is in the background, that we don't necessarily pay attention to why we are able to buy things that we can, why we are able to source certain products, why certain things cost more from one country or from another. It's because all of this is going on in the background, and kind of always has.
Yes,
you're talking about being a grandchild of empire. Like, so much of empire, right, was about securing trading routes. Like, this is a part and parcel of human life. So and food has been a massive part of it.
The Silk Roads are, as we said, they're like a network, like a lacy network of paths throughout that whole area. So the things they're bringing along are food. So we're talking like pistachios, melons, apples. That's a really interesting part of the book. And citrus, of course, the big four citrus, all came from China.
Tea and oranges all the way from China.
That's a good song. And also languages and religions. So obviously there was one part I read where the Muslims and Christians, sometimes they didn't get on necessarily, but the Jewish people, the Jewish traders, were a good bridge between the two.
Yeah.
So this is like hundreds, maybe thousands of years of people working together, empires rising and falling, and all the while, all these foods are gradually moving up from China, from Pakistan, from Mongolia, from all these amazing places that when I was growing up, they were mostly behind the Iron Curtain, so we didn't get a lot of information about them. So they were all far away, and we didn't get a chance to really understand them. But the way they brought those foods I mentioned, pistachios, oranges, melons, as part of this whole story you're telling in the book.
100%. I mean, I think that's where that's literally like I'm using food in the book and these cuisines and the recipes, and specifically the ingredients, whether we're talking about dairy preparations or chickpeas or spinach or melons, to illustrate the way in which people have moved and foods have moved with them. And I think that's, obviously I will say, I think the recipes in my book are spectacular. I love them. They're delicious. And I very much want people to cook from this book. Obviously it is a cookbook.
Yes.
But it is a lot more than that. And it's a way of using these recipes and using these ingredients to tell a larger story. And I think that's the story, that you're, pulling out there, teasing out there, is that the food has traveled and the people have traveled. And this is just a sort of way in which we are able to discuss that further and bring it to people's attention.
Sometimes I was a little nervous about approaching the recipes, but they are all incredibly user-friendly for a kitchen in this country or wherever. And I'm just looking for a particular recipe now. Here we are, Georgian summer salad.
Ah, my favorite right now. I'm making it on repeat.
Yeah. Guess
this
what?
season.
Oh, here it is.
Yum! I'm so envious. It's so good.
It's got homegrown tomatoes in there and homegrown basil. So that's going to be lunch today. But
that's
But
it's so good.
You sometimes Asian recipes can be complicated, or I haven't got the ingredients. I have to go to the shop, which I've got a whole cupboard full of ingredients anyway.
Same.
So
Yeah.
and spices, so I should be all right. But this is really, it has that kind of flavor and story of the place of Central Asia, but also it's got, in a Kentish kitchen garden, I've got the ingredients for it.
Yeah, just because of the nature of the cuisines, but also by design on my end as well. These are the flavors and the ingredients in these cuisines are ones that we are already familiar with and that we already, for the most part, have in our gardens, have in our pantries. And there's a reason for that. It's because, if we're talking about you're making an apple pie, it's because the apples grow in the UK as a result of the trade of apples across century, the movement of this fruit. Same with the cumin. I say that there are three sort of main seasonings in the whole book. It's like salt, pepper, and cumin. And kind of these days in the UK, especially, I think, you can get cumin anywhere. It's not a difficult thing to source. And while I kind of love my super stocked pantry filled with a bunch of interesting ingredients that are not necessarily ones that every home cook has in their pantry, I love the fact that Silk Roads, there's really so little that you need to go out and find and source some from the internet or just from a specialty store. It's kind of like everything you can buy in a supermarket these days, which also speaks to the beauty of a British supermarket and the diversity in the population right now, that these ingredients have become part of our everyday usage. And that has to do with not just centuries of trade, but more recent immigration movements as well.
I mean, that dish has got I'm not quite sure where strawberries originated from.
Me neither. But
Okay,
probably
so
like France.
tomatoes, I can't think. Tomatoes, Latin America, capers, Mediterranean, basil, probably Mediterranean, tarragon,
Mm-hmm.
Mediterranean,
Mm-hmm.
olive oil, which I'm just about to put on, Mediterranean, sunflower seeds, um,
I think
anywhere,
Eastern. Yeah.
feta cheese to be grated on later. That's
Oh,
Italian.
perfect.
So this is it. This is all in the recipe, but you
Yeah.
call it a Georgian summer salad. Now,
Mm-hmm.
how important is Georgia to the Silk Road? And that's quite a generic term. I wondered why you called it that.
I have a number of recipes in the book actually that start with either a or an, and that is by design because this is just one. I want to say this is an Uzbek plov. It is not just Uzbek plov. This is my take on this dish, and because that's not I specifically didn't want to necessarily like stake a claim on something that is not necessary, specifically when they're from non-Iranian or Azeri cultures. Like, this is not my culture. Like, I'm an interpreter here, not an authority necessarily. But a Georgian summer salad, this was a specifically because of the ingredients that I consumed with major gusto in like late June in Georgia when the tomatoes were just like extraordinary and the strawberries were everywhere. And there's this thing called jonjoli, which is like a pickled, kind of like a caperberry, is the closest thing I could come up with, which again, with regard to, not having kind of ingredients that you can't source, I could have said in here, put some jonjoli in your recipe, but like, where are we going to get that? So what's the closest thing? How do we approximate the flavors of a summer in Georgia, in the UK or in America or wherever else? Well, this is how I'm showing you. This is what I ate in Georgia in summer and how much tarragon and basil people use in the cuisine there. And this is my giving this taste of summer on a plate to you. So it's a Georgian summer salad.
Yeah, no, that's great. And also, we can't go down this rabbit hole. Authenticity becomes an issue here, doesn't it? Because if you say this is from this particular city or this region, and then people say it's an Georgian inspired
Yes.
salad. So because authenticity is such a minefield at the moment.
No, 100%.
But also, the book suggests that these dishes were started maybe in China. By the time they reach the end of, well, there is no end, but by the time they reach like Mediterranean or Western European kitchens, they've been transferred.
Well, 100%. And I think that that's one of the really beautiful things about food. And yeah, we don't need to have a whole conversation about authenticity, but there's a continual evolution of things, whether that is between what you make now that your mother taught you how to make, that you've changed a little something because, you didn't like what she was doing with, I don't know, a certain spice. Be like, I'm going to take that out. Like, things evolve as do humans, as we move and as we age, and that things evolve over time and space. And so, I've made it very clear, whether in the recipe titles or in the head notes, sort of the perspective that I'm coming from, and I'm laying down on top of these recipes, and that these are not, this book is not at all meant to be an encyclopedia of quote unquote definitive authentic recipes of this is shop
Yes,
book. This
yes.
is these are my takes on it, and I think I insert myself enough into the narrative to make it very clear that these dishes all mean something to me because of certain experiences or relationships, familial or otherwise, that I have had, and that I want to share those with you, but specifically to say, like, this is my take on something. And sometimes that take is more closely aligned with what you would find if you like Googled recipe for tagine. Mine is
Yes,
very
yes.
similar to that, but this is mine. Like, I put my onions in there. Like, that's how I like it. It's important to be aware of notions of ownership and authenticity, and certainly always acknowledge the perspective from which you're coming, and what you bring to the table as well, so that it doesn't kind of step on anybody's toes, because I wouldn't want that either.
No,
you
that's
know
fine. That's fair enough.
I
So
know
the,
somebody who's developing a Detroit pizza recipe right
really?
now, who's never been to Detroit,
All
has
right,
never
okay.
had never had Detroit pizza, and I'm sure it's going to be delicious because I know what a talent this person is. Distinct to me as someone from Detroit, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I recognize that kind of inclination in myself, and I respect it in others as well.
You've also, a lot of the photographs, I guess you took them,
Yeah.
all of them or most of them?
No, no, no. I took, so any of the ones
You,
that are sort of older looking,
okay, yeah. So
my father took, like, end papers, this front to end paper. This is outside my father's village in Iran and was taken in
beautiful.
the 1970s. The other one, again, outside my father's village in Iran in the 1970s. So all of these kind of slide photography, all my dad's photos, unless he's in it, which means someone else has taken it.
There's a picture of you here in Shanghai in 1999.
Yeah.
So you've been to a lot
I
of
know
these
who took that
places.
one.
All right.
Brian Moore. Yeah, no, I've been, these are not, with the exception of kind of Turkmenistan, which I have yet to get to. I've traveled to these countries,
Okay.
and Iran. I've never been to
Never.
Iran.
Okay, that's a shame. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it is a shame, and it's unfortunately, for a split second in January, I thought maybe things would be different, and they are definitely not. I'm not going anytime soon, sadly.
I travelled to Turkmenistan in the when was it in the late 1990s. I was writing about
Amazing.
oil and gas,
Mm.
and so we went to see a new gas plant out there, and I private flight with an oil company. I remember going to the market, and it was camel heads on spikes and all sorts of amazing things. And then we drove west, and then we had the mountains of Iran on our left, and it was
Hmm.
like beautiful mountains. They're like the snow on the top and that kind of grey granite colouring underneath.
Oh,
And
wow.
all of us were just like, because Iran for us is another place that's out of bounds,
Yeah.
and it was like a mythical place, and
Yeah.
amazing learning and thousands of years of history, thousands of years of design, life, and everything. So it was a fantastic journey. But you've never been to Iran. How does that
No.
feel? And
I mean, honestly, I'm 45 years old. I've never been to Iran. I don't know when I will go. It maybe it doesn't feel like anything to me because it is just the life I know.
yes,
We go to Azerbaijan. We have family come over from Iran to meet us in Turkey.
okay,
I love that it's a 5 hour flight to Baku from Gatwick, which is amazing. I have gotten to know my heritage more through the cooking of Iranian food, obviously, than the visiting there, because that's just not happening. I mean, I could go. I could go. I can get my Iranian passport. That's because I'd have to fly on an Iranian passport. But then, my dad's persona non grata there, so I don't think I would be really good. It would not be good for me. Just not going to try that. But I think that, it was really interesting. We went, the last time I was in Azerbaijan, my father was there as well, and we went with so the diaspora committee took us down to the Iranian border to go see this beautiful bridge from the 11th century called the Khurafaran Bridge that went over the river that is almost dried up now, that basically is the border between Azerbaijan and Iran. And my father had always wanted to see this bridge. And since we were there, they were like, oh, we'll take you. And we had to like drive through this militarized area. And they were like, don't step over there. There's unexploded landmines and also poisonous snakes. And I was like, okay, this is fun. This is great. I'm going to stick to the path. But there was this gorgeous old stone bridge, crumbling stone bridge. And on one end of it was the Azerbaijani flag. And on the other end of it was the Iranian flag. And you could see people on the other side of the bridge kind of down by the water. And we're on the other side. And there were these green rolling hills. And I think there is a picture of it in the book as well. And my phone popped up. EE told me that I was in Iran. And I was like,
really?
well, that's funny because I'm so close. But that was as close, and it was a very kind of emotional and sort of disorienting feeling, actually, to be there, to be so close to Iran, like literally looking like that's the closest I've ever been, and to be there with my father too, who at that point in time was 86 years old, and he knew he was kind of never able to return to his homeland, but to be able to be on that one side of this crumbling old bridge that used to allow, it was a Silk Roads era bridge that traders and people would go across, and to sort of actually see the sort of artificiality of borders, that like Iran was just across, like I could just look at it, like, and that's it, and but to not be able to actually go was really, it was
emotional, I should think.
It was emotional, and he was very touched, and none of us exploded the landmines, so
no, good.
That was good.
But we were talking about Iran, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan. These are all modern creations, really. So the Silk Roads, which have been going for thousands of years, they were more tribal. I've just been reading about the Sogdians, who kind of the original.
Those are the ancestors of the Uyghurs.
That's right.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, the slight problem with your book is that there's so many rabbit holes I want to go down with.
I know.
So many things spark interest.
Stop myself. On like many occasions, be like, we're going to set that aside. We're not going to do it.
So you must have actually, on that point, you must have had an idea, a framework. So how the food sets. I mean, it's a cookbook, memoir, anthropological book, but mainly it's about the food and how to cook it. They are delicious recipes. So how did you decide what recipes to put in, what ingredients to put in? And was there one particular ingredient, dish, or culinary tradition that best represents the Silk Road for you?
Okay,
that's a lot of questions.
That's a lot of questions there. I will say that in terms of the layout, the way I oriented it in terms of the table of contents, I really wanted to, because it was going to be used by Western kitchens, really wanted to make it very familiar. Salads, soups and stews, ferments and pickles, eggs. I wanted to differentiate between a sort of vegetarian zone for kind of mains, and then meats, rice, noodles, dumplings, and bread, rather than, there was a discussion with my editors, if we wanted to do it geographically, it'd be like Iran, China, but that kind of goes against what I wanted to talk about, is how these things kind of move and how the food and the cultures are related. So I wanted you to be able to pick this up and say, okay, I want to make a salad. Here's where I'll find it. And on that note, I was really, really like crazy stickler for the index. I love an index in a cookbook, and I think mine's really good. Back and forth, and they were like, Anna, you're crazy. It's like, but you want to know where to find, like, it's really important because there's so much in here. If you want to see something about Marco Polo or Genghis Khan or the Tang Dynasty poet, you'll be able to find it in the index, as well as where radishes come into your ingredients.
Actually, radishes and spinach, two things that I wasn't really expecting to see. Some really delicious ingredients.
Spinach is from Iran.
I know,
Spinach is from
who
Iran.
knew?
It's amazing. I feel like in writing of the recipes and in the head notes, I just kept having these little epiphanies because I didn't know, like I went into, I'm like, well, I know I'm going to write about this and I know I'm going to write about that, but I didn't necessarily know how everything was going to fit together until it fit together. So in terms of, what to pick out and what to not pick out, like once I realized, or include or not include, once I learned that spinach came from Iran, it sort of made more sense to have an additional spinach recipe in there as opposed to something else entirely, just to continue that sort of narrative, because again, this is a book, this is curation. Every single cookbook, this is not an encyclopedia. This is me giving you my take on something. So that is going to include certain things and exclude certain things. And that's just the nature of, I mean, it's not a 1,000-page book and you don't want that.
No,
You
we
know,
don't. No.
like we don't want that. Maybe we do, but like that's not to me, up to me to give it to you. So it really came down to space and time. And like, for instance, I have what I consider to be one of the most delicious recipes that did not make it into the book is a Silk Road Scotch egg,
Right.
which I served at a Quality Wines lunch in April that I did there in Farringdon in London. And basically people were like, why is this not in the book? And I said, because, you know, there are a gazillion Scotch egg recipes out there.
No, we always need another one.
There's not a gazillion Georgian summer salads. So like what to highlight and what to use later on, hold back. I'm not including the Scotch egg, not because it's an excellent recipe or a mouthful, but I can use it. I can share it with you elsewhere, but within the narrative, you know, maybe it doesn't need to be included here because you only have 256 pages. I have a gorgeous stuffed aubergine dish. I was like, you know what? That was on the cover of one of the Otto Lengi books. You know, we all know what one of these aubergines looks like, and they're wonderful. And mine is fantastic. But maybe I would like to show you sort of how to make a Turkmen, you know, fish dish instead.
Yeah, and there's chapters on soups and stews,
Yeah.
ferments and pickles. I'm always a bit nervous about ferments and pickles because so I'm going to be doing this, and I've got some yogurt especially to do some.
Are you gonna make some stew?
Yes.
It is perfect, by the way, for this time of year. It's like a sparkling, it's like a yogurt spritzer. It's a delight.
I'm making that.
And we used to, when we would go as kids, we'd drive to Toronto with my family from Detroit. It's a 4-hour drive. And one of the reasons we went is because there was a large Iranian population there. And, you know, my dad had friends, but it was also like stock up on breads, stock up on saffron, on pistachios, things if he wasn't going back and forth to Iran that we could get because there was no sort of embargo against those goods.
Yeah.
The trade of the goods into Canada at the time. But I remember my dad coming back with these like bottles of this sparkling fermented yogurt drink and trying to force us kids to drink it. And we were like, this is foul. And now as an adult, I'm like, this is great. Instead of just having my like morning yogurt, I hydrate it up a little bit more and I drink it, and it's refreshing and delicious and probiotic too.
It's all in there. It's all in there.
It's all in there.
Is there a particular dish or ingredient that you feel, I mean, I know that's an impossibly big question, but is there another ingredient that really, I mean, you mentioned cumin.
I think cumin really ties it all together for me personally. I had again, going back to the late 90s in Beijing, it was the first time I had Uyghur food. This was prior to my father coming over there. And I write about it in the book because it was such a memorable experience, and it was eating Uyghur food for the first time, these noodles with lamb and tomato, and I was so confused because it didn't taste like quote unquote Chinese food, but I was like, but I'm in China, so like, what am I eating, and why does this taste so familiar to me? And it turns out the reason it tasted so familiar to me was because of the use of cumin. So, you know, as a taste memory for myself, cumin certainly kind of ties everything together. But as you go through Silk Roads, as you go through the book, like as I said, you know, that's one of those things that just it's on a constant repeat. Like there's cumin in so much, and it is a flavor that I think does tie so much of this region together. But I would recommend, I mean, go try the Uzbek plov. I mean, rice is my favorite food in the world. And I think despite the fact that I, you know, the tachin that I have, which is an Iranian saffron yogurt rice dish, which is like actually my favorite dish in the world. But I think that in terms of getting a greater understanding or sort of showcasing the connected nature of these cuisines, the Uzbek plov is the way to go. You know, you've got the rice, you've got the lamb, you've got the cumin, you've got carrots, and yes, little baby quail eggs. It's really delicious. And it is, again, this is one of the recipes in there that starts with an article. It's an Uzbek plov. There are thousands of them. Every family has their own variety. So this is my take on, you know, a quintessential Uzbek dish, but one that is also a Uyghur dish. A Uyghur is basically a and Uzbek pulao. Like they're all related.
And here's a dish, a perfect pot of Iranian rice with potatoes. That's
Yes.
a mix you don't see every day.
Well, I mean, in Iranian rice or in Persian rice, you get what you would call tadig on the bottom, the crispy layer on the bottom. In Azeri Turkish, we call it gazmah, so that's what I've grown up calling it, and that's what I refer to it as in the book, gazmah. And oftentimes it'll just be the rice itself with a little maybe yogurt to bind it and sort of crisp it up, some saffron. Or, I mean, I really love like a pita bread, lavash. The bread one is kind of my favorite. But the potato, I think, is a really, really special kind of show-stopping carb on carb deliciousness, right? Uh, we had this, one of my classmates in middle school when I was in, I guess that's primary school here, came over and she just kept like asking for years afterwards, can I come over to your house for rice and potatoes, rice and potatoes? So I wanted to have that in there to kind of have a base rice recipe.
It's a fantastic story. As I mentioned earlier, the Silk Roads for us was very, for me, my generation, secondary school in the 70s and early 80s. The Silk Roads and the food it brings, and the whole trade and religion and language and people seems like a ripe time now for understanding what's going on and what it meant to us. I think you mentioned somewhere before that, well, for us, my British atlas in the 70s was basically pink, the historical atlas, and it was all the trade routes, which are kind of Silk Roads, but they're maritime Silk Roads. So it was all for us as a naval country, a naval empire.
Mm-hmm.
It was important well, we focused on that. We were taught about all the East India, in a
100%.
yeah, in a very different
No,
way.
I mean, I think it's really interesting that, it's, and because we in the US too, there's so much discussion of like, the Trans-Columbia and the Columbian Exchange and, the ships and even like the slave trade, right? Like all of this is ocean-based, is water-based trade, it's empire. And the Silk Roads were overland and they were, at the heyday, these are not trade routes controlled by Western empires, right? Like we never, I think we don't learn about it because nobody's learning about the Mongols. Nobody knows who the Songdians are. We barely know who the Ottoman Empire is. Like this is just not how our history has been taught, how global history has been taught to us. And I think that it is the world is opening up continually more so. And I say that, not just because obviously in the 90s, the fall of the Soviet Union, but like Turkmenistan is about to relax its visa restrictions for tourists. Like these are places that are becoming actually more accessible. There's a new flight. Like I said, there's a flight from Gatwick to Baku. You can fly to Tbilisi direct. You can now fly to Yerevan, to Armenia direct. You can fly to Tashkent direct from the UK. Like we literally are now more physically able to visit these regions, and whether it's physical travel or traveling through books and food, that kind of experiential understanding is the kind that can really start to help us understand for other cultures better. And so if you can't get on a plane, like go cook a dish, like taste something and recognize that maybe these are all ingredients you have in your cupboard, but in the process of putting this dish together, you are transported also, and you might know a little bit more about what like summer in Georgia tastes like or looks like.
I think the way you've done the book is the head notes are both personal and instructive, so that it's a really lovely balance. The instructions are easy to follow, which is important in a book like this. No, it's a really fantastic book. No, it's a fantastic book. What else? I bought some tofu as well. So this week I'm going to be transporting myself to Samarkand in like the 8th century. My son is a tofu fan, so he's introduced
Mine
it to me.
too.
So
my kid was jumping up and down. He saw that there's tofu in the refrigerator and was literally yesterday jumping up and down going, tofu, tofu, tofu. I turned to my husband. I was like, did you ever imagine like this was going to be our child and our life and our world, that you can just go to the grocery store also and buy tofu? It's kind of incredible. It's not this thing left for like a health food fanatic in the 60s and 70s.
So what's next for Anna Ansari? What's the plan?
I've got some plans. I have ideas for, honestly, I have ideas for 1, 2, 3. I have like 5 other books in my head. So hopefully they will materialize.
They will. They will. Because you've also won the awards, Guild of Food Awards, Guild of Food Writers Award.
Yeah.
And I opened my Instagram this morning. The first thing I saw was your nomination for the Be Inclusive Hospitality Writing Award.
Yeah.
So obviously you've hit a nerve here, and your style is very accessible, readable, and enjoyable. So we also do a lot of cooking as well. You just mentioned something in an event you did in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Yeah, no, so I'm going back to Michigan later this month for the Traverse City Food and Wine, um, which is a big festival that, brings together all the best of the Midwest, basically. And I'm doing a lunch in a vineyard there. I'm doing a talk with a number of other cookbook authors. Rod Bard from This Is Taste podcast is moderating that. Aber Behrens, Martin Sorge, who else? There's a few other people. Let's see, I'm doing a dinner there as well, like a 4-course, like high-end dinner. So I don't necessarily do all the cooking myself, because I am not, again, one of the reasons that the recipes I think are hopefully very home cook friendly is because I am a home cook. I am not a trained chef. I have never worked in a restaurant. I've never worked in hospitality before, but I love throwing a dinner party. I can easily cook for 25 people. I had to kind of pare down the recipes when I met my husband. I was like, I don't know how to cook for 2 people. I only know how to cook for a crowd. Like, show me what to do with this pork shoulder, not a pork, rib or, a pork chop. But so I'm going to be doing a number of these dinners at this festival later on. I think I have a dinner up in Scotland planned with the Canooker Inn in Fife in September. I'm talking with the folk at Lebnani out in Surrey, the Lebanese restaurant, to be doing something also this fall to get them. But I'm just, continuing to write some things. I've got some pieces I'm working on now. Okay. I've got, like I said, I've got some book proposal ideas in my head, and just, I have a 7-year-old. I run a business in the US. I keep myself very, very busy. I've got piles of laundry, as everyone, and dishes. I just said to someone, I was like, I wish I had a second dishwasher. I get it now. I get why people want these things, but you don't have the space. So no, Bruce, I keep myself quite busy, and it's really wonderful because, I'm doing now things that I love so deeply, and it's so satisfying to just write recipes that I enjoy and that I can share with people. I have a Substack, Where in the World is Anna Ansari.substack.com.
Okay. I was just about to ask for the links.
I am trying to get, I have a plan. It's like a monthly plan, but I'm really, for the next year, want to focus on sort of writing more there. Substack provides a really wonderful community and platform for people to write, but mine is not paid. So I don't have that sort of, little someone on my shoulder being like, you have to get something out for your paid, people, because people are paying for it. But I don't do that because I also don't necessarily think, we don't all have the money to spend a ton of money on everybody's newsletter.
And that's, what was the name again?
It's Where in the World is Anna Ansari. I don't know if you remember, if you had over here the game and the books, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego?
I don't remember that, but I'm a child of the 70s, so maybe.
So it was a thing in the 80s and 90s, at least in the US, and it was about this woman who went around the world to different places, like solving historical mysteries, and I was in love with it, and I learned so much about world geography from the show, from the books, from the game, and my parents would just always joke when I would be in China and I wouldn't respond to their emails. They'd be like, "Where in the world is Anna Ansari?" So I kind of try to explore different countries via writing and food on the Substack, as well as provide a recipe maybe once a month and some other little thoughts. I just had one on how I'm just turned 45 and what that meant to me. So no, don't grimace. 45 is great.
I would love to be 45. I'm way above that. I would love to be back at 45. I'm grimacing because of me, feeling sorry for me. But are you on Instagram as well?
I'm on Instagram. My handle is This Place Tastes Delicious.
Okay.
Which
is that a regular thing for you?
It does. This place does. Yeah. I'm on Instagram every day. I've been on Instagram since 2011. I think I was I started it on that platform early. I love photos, visual
Mm.
arts, and yeah, I mean, it used to be just random things of like, here's the book I'm reading, when it was 2012, and that's what people were literally like Instagramming what they were doing. But no, I share a lot of food and just what other people are doing, people that I support and whose work that I enjoy. I'm always up for happy to reshare and willing sort of support and try and champion the great food communities in the US and the UK especially.
Fantastic. Last thing, Anna. So if I'm having a guest, which I haven't got, but I might do it anyway, for dinner tonight, what
Hmm.
would be your starter main pudding? Because there's some really delicious puddings in here. The rice pudding you mentioned.
Make the eggplant frites, the aubergine frites. The
Okay.
sort of they're kind of like deep fried little fingers of aubergine that are then dusted in cumin and drizzled with a little pomegranate molasses or honey. They're really easy. They're really delicious. They're really special, and they're very familiar. They're kind of reminiscent of a Spanish tapas that so many of us are familiar with, but it's that cumin that takes it to a different place entirely that kind of surprises and delights. So start with the aubergine
Okay.
frite.
That's the first
Move
one.
in. I mean, obviously, then you're gonna have a Georgian summer salad because it's August in
Yeah. Got
but
that.
I have to say, I think the salad chapter is one of the like real sleeper hit chapters of the book because again, I don't think necessarily people really equate these regions of the world with fresh raw salads and fruit and vegetable. And these salads, they're so good.
This rovot salad with rhubarb. So I've got rhubarb in the garden.
Rhubarb, radish, a little creme fraiche.
Yeah.
Do it.
Easy.
I think that the Silk Road stuffed fish would actually make a really lovely main, especially this time of year. Kind of a lighter main, and again,
Okay.
it's just stuffed with some sautéed herbs, some walnuts, some pomegranates, pomegranate molasses, and just baked in the oven. You can also just do a little fish fillet actually, and make that same topping and just put it on top as a
Uh-huh.
little like rather than stuffing it in a whole cavity. But I love serving a whole fish. I think it's really special.
Yes, I agree.
People don't necessarily realize how simple it is, and it's that's a wonderful and easy beautiful main. You get some boiled potatoes, you've done all this, you don't need to make any rice. And then for pudding this time of year, yeah, I do the rice pudding there.
The
That's where
rice
you get your
pudding.
rice. Do the tres leches rice pudding.
Translations. Fantastic. And Anna, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Bruce. This is a delight. Yeah, thank you for having me.
And thank you for spending so much time in compiling this really fabulous book.
It was a
And
genuine joy and pleasure, and just I love it so much, and I hope others do as well.
I think, like you mentioned, recipes are very accessible
They're so
the whole way
easy.
through.
Yeah, it was really key to for me. I want people to be able to taste these flavors and to realize that this is not, even though it's far away, these areas, even in the imagination, if not in the physical sense, but that you can travel there, you can taste them in your own kitchen pretty easily, and cost effectively as well.
Perfect. On that note, thank you so much, Anna. And
Thank you, Bruce.
we look forward to seeing what you're going to do next on Substack and
Thank you.
Instagram.
You too.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.